Welcome to Queues and Views, first on the web for collecting English billiard cues.
This is my billiard room, which is an early 1900s Burroughs and Watts table in golden oak, and the scoreboard to match. Came from a mansion house in Reading. History, I think, was private commission to a house in central London, maybe Kensington, somewhere around there. On this side, I've got my pool table and my bar at the far side, which is actually made out of an old snooker table. So the bar itself is the side of the table. There's bits from the side facing, and the footrest is a cushion.
This is Mike Fearnley. I've been lucky enough to be invited to Queensbury Cues, which is the brainchild and project of my friend and fellow former cue collector Mike Fearnley's. And I've been invited this afternoon to talk to you about cues and more cues.
Sounds good to me.
So, first off, you were well known as a cue collector, oldcues.com website, and built up a nice big collection of varied cues. This is how I first got to know of you. Mm-hmm. So what was it really that sparked your interest in cues?
Like many cue collectors, originally it was a playing cue, so I was looking for the magic cue, the cue that turned me into Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Right.
250 cues later, I never really found it, unfortunately.
But you do play a decent game. You're a comfortable. You play both snooker, billiards, and pool.
Yeah, originally I played pool for many years. I played snooker as a child, but I didn't go back to playing snooker till the early 30s.
Right.
So all the bad habits from pool, unfortunately, had taken over by then.
Right. But do you think, you've got your own table, in fact your own tables, because you've got a pool table and a snooker table. Do you find that you're working those bad habits out of your system these days? Or are new bad habits creeping in?
More and more every day, unfortunately. When I first started playing snooker, you have to knuckle down, you have to take it a little bit more seriously than pool. Pool to me was show off a little bit, win the game without trying, but you can't do that snooker, no. You get beat.
No, it finds you out, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you've also played billiards.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Have you had decent sized breaks at billiards?
Oh, maybe 50, 55, something like that. So not huge.
Yeah, no, it's a much harder game than people realise, I think, with the controlling of 3 balls as opposed to predominantly 2. So I think my ice break's 35, 36, but I've not played it much. Yeah. So I think you'd certainly take care of me on a game of billiards. So, which players influenced you then? Which you mentioned Ronnie O'Sullivan. We're all impressed by Ronnie's abilities on a billiard table, on a snooker table, as most people call them. But who else inspired you when you're in your younger days?
Well, it was all about winners. So it was Steve Davis, unfortunately. Right. Bit unpopular for the time. My father was a massive Jimmy White fan, but at the end of the day, Steve Davis was the winner, wasn't he?
Yeah. And followed up quickly by Stephen Hendry. Now, in my dad's era, he got me interested in older players, even players from the era that was before that I'd been watching it, like John Spencer, Ray Reardon. Not so much Alex Higgins, but I was impressed with Ray Reardon as a winner, like you say. 6 World Championships. Mm-hmm. Alex gets all the adulation. He won 2, but he won lots of other tournaments. And but Ray Reardon won 6, and an all-round tactical player, brilliant to watch. I bumped into Ray Reardon at the Crucible, shared a lift with him. That day certainly had its ups and downs. But yeah, so your interest in cues then developed in terms of finding the magic wand, which we've all done. That's more or less how I started. Mainly I was playing league pool, and I was buying cues from such as Sug Sports. I bought the odd Power Glide, which were always a bit more expensive back then. And then I found out about the difference between a hand splice cue and a machine splice cue. So naturally I'm pursuing then whether I could get a decent hand splice cue. And then the older players started to tell me, well, what you really want is a really good old cue made out of English ash. So then I started pursuing that. Is yours a similar journey, really?
Yeah, I think I started maybe at 8 years old with the Steve Davis Riley cue.
Right.
Yeah, you always think maybe more expensive might be better. It's a bit of a misnomer that more expensive means better always, but progressed to a first hand splice cue was a Q-Craft.
Right. Really? Which Q-Craft was it?
Sherwood.
Right. My first decent hand splice cue was a Q-Craft Royal Standard that I got from Anthony Bridges, so that's something we have in common. The
dot-to-dot joints, which you lend somebody your cue and they break the joint, give it your back broken. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, that left a scar. You were those Sherwoods. A lot of them were quite heavy, I thought.
The brass plates dropped out almost always, so I took a couple of ounces off there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because they had 2 plates, didn't they? Was it a big plate?
Big brass plate.
Big, I remember it. And it wasn't really close to end at cue, were it? There was a gap. Yeah. What was that facing splice on them? It was cherry or something?
It was some kind of a burr, I think. But yeah, it's a long time ago. So that's probably 96, 97. That's pocket money time. So
that was your first, as you might say, decent cue. And you had that for a while until someone took a bit of a fearsome grip to it and therefore sort of killed it in a sense. But that got you interested though, and to looking into what could be achieved with different cues.
Yeah, I think pool's that kind of thing. It does such fine margins at pool that you're always looking for something a little bit different, a smaller cue, a heavier cue, whatever it was, a shorter cue maybe.
Yes.
So I tried lots of different cues, to be honest, and then a bit of a revelation when I picked up an old cue, and a nice lightweight cue, very reactive, and it was a bit of an eye opener for me. So
you started to get through the ball really well with that, and found you could play shots with ease that you were having to perhaps punch before.
Yeah, just a better feel maybe than. I think by then cues were getting quite heavy, so there were people using 18.5, 19 ounce cues for pool. It does take away a feel a little bit for me.
Yeah. So you used that old cue for a long time. Have you still got it?
No, the first old cue I had was a Walter Donaldson cue.
Right.
It was really infuriating. I must have bid on 20 different cues. Been outbid probably by you at the time.
No, behave yourself. Probably not.
I finally got the Walter Donaldson, and it was just fantastic. Used it for a long time.
What shaft, Ash?
Hornbeam.
Hornbeam, yeah. A lot of them are hornbeam. Post-war cues. So you used that Walter Donaldson. I think mahogany. Would it be a mahogany facing splice?
Probably.
Yeah, nice. I've got a hornbeam one. If you're still sort of struggling with me outbidding you on some, I've got a hornbeam Walter Donaldson. As it happens, let's negotiate. But and so then you get into the sort of buying and selling, the swapping. You start getting a bit of an association with other people in the hobby, don't you? And it brings a new dimension to it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, at the time, there were lots of cues coming up on eBay. I think when I first started collecting cues, there were a couple of people selling their collections.
Yeah.
So you'd see 10 a week, something like that, but sometimes you don't see. So I managed to pick up quite a lot of cues in a short amount of time. Changed my playing cue several times. Very bad for my game. Don't recommend cue collecting if you want to be a good player. You're better sticking to one cue, I think.
Yeah. Well, as you know, a friend of mine, Dominic Dale, he's always changing cues, and it makes me wonder what a stellar career he could have had if he'd have found what to him was the perennial, permanent magic wand. Because he's won 2 ranking tournaments, a couple of big invitation tournaments, and the shootout. So it makes me wonder what he could have done.
Yeah, it's true.
So you ended up with a large collection, a very varied collection, and in fact, when you decided to sell up, I visited you a couple of times, bought some cues from you. I can remember the one that stands out to me is the Alcock Champion cue that's like very similar to Walter Lindrum's own cue. Now, I brought up Dominic Dale for a reason. When he saw that cue, when I showed it to him, he'd seen Walter Lindrum's actual cue in Australia, and he said it was almost identical in terms of the shape of it, the size of it, and the timber and everything. So I were even more indebted to yourself for letting me have that cue.
I'm pleased it went to a good home.
I've still got it, and I don't plan to sell it anytime soon. So you ended up with a big collection, but you made the decision to part with them to perhaps apart from the new venture?
Well, it was always my intention when I first started collecting cues and I realised how much money I was spending on cues was one day I'll put that towards a billiard room.
Ah, yes.
So that was always kind of the plan. I'm thinking whatever it costs, and it could be a significant amount of money, I would have a billiard room, and I got the opportunity to purchase this house, and this is the billiard room.
Yeah, well, we'll have a little tour around the billiard room next. What we plan to do is show you some cues that Mike has made more recently, and also Mike's expertise now on timber. I mean, always had an interest, but now he's something of a bit of an expert on different timbers and how they look when they're finished in a cue compared to how they start out. So we'll move to that section in a moment. Earlier on, Mike, we were talking about timber, and it became obvious in our conversation that you select your timber almost piece by piece for its aesthetic beauty. Now this is something that I think, because you're making cues as it were one at a time as opposed to mass producing cues, you can have the attention to detail that allows the cue to look its best and hopefully play its best for its eventual owner. So I wonder if it's worth us looking at particularly perhaps a wood that at a glance is not the most exciting, but is actually famous and synonymous with cues, which is ash for the shafts and ebony for the majority of the butt. So would you like to tell me and our viewers what it is about this timber that attracts you and what you like about it and why you chose it in a way?
Yeah, obviously ash is the classic material for cue shafts. Always been a favourite of mine. Played with maple, but I do prefer ash.
Mm-hmm.
Starts off in a very big square, ends up, if we're lucky, looking a little bit like a cue.
Yes.
But yeah, main part of a cue, or the big part of the cue, is the butt.
Yeah.
Here's some examples of different types of ebony. So all ebony look completely different.
Mm.
So on one side you've got the pale moon ebony, so basically a white with a black streak. You've then got your Indian ebony, which is light streaks, almost a teal colour.
Yeah.
Again, colours change slightly once you've actually made the cue. We've got some stripy ebony, which is just black with some white lines in.
Yeah.
Your standard ebony that you would get if you went to a wood shop is generally black. The odd little white streak that you probably can't see, but basically once some oil goes on there, it turns black.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, you've got the Holy Grail, the one that everybody wants, which is your jet black ebony.
Mm-hmm.
If you think John Paris Ultimate,
Yes.
you're looking for a piece like that.
Yeah.
If you were going to get a crate of maybe 200, 250 pieces of ebony, I'm guessing you'd have 20
Right.
that look like that.
And again, when you go to the wholesaler that sells the wood, you're looking for these gradations to make the individual cue around the particular wood you've chosen. So sometimes you're looking for the jet black, not always though. Because obviously you wouldn't have the variety on the table.
No, absolutely, yeah. So you very rarely get a full piece that's black. Essentially you get 4 splices generally, maybe 5 if you want to pinch a little bit.
Right.
But sometimes you're happy 1 jet black piece out of 1 block, 3 mixed ones. But essentially, yeah, pick ones with the nice grain and nice consistency. If it's got some flecks in there and you think it'll make a nice cue, keep them together so it's consistent and you'll make a nice cue out of it.
Yes. And what are the hazards of working with these? I mean, because any wastage is going to be incredibly expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the hazard, main thing is the toxicity of them. So it's full mask when you're working on them.
Right.
Very bad stuff gets into your lungs. I think there's been lots of cue makers over the years have deteriorated their health because of it.
Right.
So yeah, respiratory masks on all the time.
So this wood looks, to me, as a person who usually sees cues that are finished, it looks quite grey, quite sort of lacking in sheen and lustrousness. And when you first put it into the cue, that's how it looks. When you first build the cue, that's how it looks as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult to see the colour sometimes that you're going to end up with. The light impacts the colour of certain timbers, particularly one we're going to come to in a short while. But yeah, the piece of Macassar I have here is grey, orange, brown, and it'll probably look just brown and black by the time we make a cue from it.
So the finishing process then becomes crucial. And it's something that you've been working on quite a lot. And this cue here, I mean, okay, we've got the ebony here. And what's this wood?
It's walnut. It's that Turkish walnut.
Turkish walnut. And you've got the shine, and so you can see through. Now, some cue makers in the past have shown me if you wet the woods just to show you how it's going to look when it's finished. But that's how it looks when it's either got lacquer or some sort of treatment on the wood. So is there a special process that you use? There's special chemicals that you use?
There's lots of different ways to finish a cue, and I do finish cues in lots of different ways, depending on which one I think will look the best. Generally, most of them are oil-based. If you're wanting something with a high gloss finish, it's going to be oil with a hardener or a varnishing, something like a Danish oil or some other finishing oil. Essentially, if you just rub linseed oil into a cue, you're not going to get a high gloss finish on it.
Right. And this is your own personal playing cue, I'll give it you.
It is.
And what have we got this cue made from?
So ash shaft, very chunky.
Yeah.
We've got a Cocobolo main splice on the butt,
Yeah.
and 4 quilted maple bottom splices.
Yeah. Just in case it's not coming out on the camera, the quilted maple, it's like a ripple, a delicate ripply look to it.
It is. It's quite soft timber.
Yeah.
So if your cue's going to have a hard life, probably wouldn't recommend
Right.
something like a quilted maple on there. I've had this cue about 2 years, so I can refinish it myself, but there are quite a lot of dings,
Right.
which you don't get with a hard ebony because it's a much tougher wood.
Very good. Thank you. I'll put that back carefully as it's your magic wand of the moment, and hopefully will be for a while to come. So we'll move on in a minute to showing finished cues, completely finished cues, and some of the more exotic timbers that are there just to make the cue look beautiful, and you will see that actually they do. So we've just been talking about standard butt timbers, which are hardwood, but we also touched on a little bit towards the end your own personal cue, which is ash shaft with decorative woods for the butt. You went through what the decorative timbers were on that cue, but you also use lots of other exciting and attractive timbers in the making of your cue. Usually maple or ash shafts, so that's pretty standard. Often ebony for the top part of the butt, as I would say. Not always, but there are lots of exotic timbers. What would you like to say about some of these cues that are actually the finished product that you have here on your own table?
I guess personally that it is purely decoration, so it makes no difference to the playability of a cue. May have some effect on the balance. Ebony is a very heavy wood, so if you have a long butted ebony 3/4 cue, it's going to be quite difficult to get a low weight.
Yeah.
So below maybe 18.5 ounces are a real struggle. But you can use lighter timbers, something like an olive wood, which I have in the cues here, a couple of the cues here, with a few veneers. That's a bit lighter.
Are these both olive wood?
They are, yes.
Yeah, and again, this is pointing out the fact that it looks different. Different pieces of timber, even though it's from the same tree, can look a different colour when the cue's finished.
Yeah, absolutely. Even 2 bits of timber from the same board can look completely different.
Right.
So we've a 4 splice cue with 4 lower splices, and also one with just a single lower splice.
I'll just turn that over so that you can see. And again, that's it's lustrous. It shines out. It's almost a honey colour. It's a lovely coloured wood, really. And so then we move on to the next cue. This one.
Yeah, so a slightly different butt on this one. A bit of a stripy Macassar, but absolutely lovely. A bit of my nemesis because it disagrees with me. My eye stream, nose streams. Be very careful working with it.
Is this the timber that you were working on that made it go all red, bright red as well?
It is, yeah.
I remember that on Facebook. Mike has a Facebook page, and he sometimes shows the trials and tribulations of making these cues.
Yeah, they can be. This one in particular, it's got snakewood front splice. Snakewood for me, as a hobby cue maker, is difficult timber to work with. It's extremely hard. It's brittle, but it looks beautiful when you get it right.
Now, back in the day, I mean, we were talking about cue collecting earlier. You used to see quite often full snakewood buttered rider cues, and some of it. I mean, talk about quilted. It's even more. This white's called snakewood because it looks like a snake's skin in a way, and it is absolutely a fabulous wood to look at.
It is terrifically expensive though. Huge retail price at a small 12-inch block, around the £100 mark to buy yourself, let alone working with it and having wastage as well. So yeah, very expensive.
And another thing to say about snakewood, it's almost the same weight, I believe, as ebony. So a full snakewood buttered cue is virtually indistinguishable weight-wise from an ebony cue.
It is. It's extremely hard though, so a bit harder than ebony.
Which is why it polishes up so nice.
Absolutely.
Very good. Love this snakewood. Next.
It's the old Thoya burr. Again, this is quite light wood. It's not particularly hard at all. It's almost flaky. Again, quite difficult to work with because it chips off and splinters. So a lot of wastage for me making those kind of cues.
And is that ebony?
It's a Macassar ebony on this one again.
Yeah, I'm going to say there's some colour in it, so I knew it was something different. Again, I like the look of that cue. It has a look of tradition about it. Some of this you'll often see in old Reese cues, cannon match cues and that kind of thing. You'll see this type of patination in the timber. Obviously, the Reese has got no veneer, and the cannon match cues usually got a green veneer on top of that. But that's beautiful.
It's when I was doing my descriptions when I had all the old cues. For me, a cue, if it was black, it was ebony. If it was brown, I wasn't sure. I usually went with rosewood. I didn't really know at the time that there's so many different colours of ebony. I think I mislabelled many of my cues, probably 50% of them.
So you've learned, in terms of what spurred you to start making cues. I mean, you were telling me earlier that it's partly due to lockdown and the fact that you were becalmed, as many of us were, and it gave you something constructive to do, literally. So it's also taught you things that you never knew.
It has, yeah. It's been a great experience all round. It's something that I always thought I'd like to try, but I was never confident that I'd be able to do it. I don't like failure, so it's one that if I was going to try, I was going to seek some help, get the right equipment in, and do the best I can.
And I get the impression it's physically arduous for you at times, and that you have to take rests, and you've got to be careful that you don't overstretch yourself physically at times.
It is, yeah. I had an accident before lockdown and it was extremely difficult, so I use automation, I use machinery and power tools, but the handmade cues, they don't go into a machine and a cue comes out the other side for sure.
So would you say it's partly therapeutic? I mean, there's an end product that is undeniably beautiful, practical, usable. It's a learning experience, it's a confidence builder, and it's also, as I say, therapeutic for you.
Absolutely, even when they don't come out right, it can be expensive, but yeah, you learn every time. I'm always a big believer not to make the same mistake twice, so if you keep with that mentality, eventually you'll get one that comes out right.
Very well. So, the next one, I quite like this cue. I put one or two decent balls myself with this cue, which shows that there's something miracle worker going on here, if I can pop balls with it. Now this timber, I'm going to say what this is because I'm thinking of buying this cue from Mike. Mike doesn't make cues to order for specific people, but if it works out and we like it and we try it and what have you, he may consider letting us have it. And this is yew. The timber in this is yew. That's a thin veneer of ebony, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, and ebony again. And this is yew and yew. Suits you, sir.
Yeah, it does indeed. When making that cue, I picked out a special, again, I like to select the bits of timber for the front facing splice. Picked out a really punky bit, and actually it's difficult to actually see what you're going to end up with, so the flat had to be a little bit longer than my usual cues, just to actually get the different colours and the texture and the grain to actually come out into the facing splice.
Yeah, and I remember seeing it when it didn't have this lustrous high gloss finish on it, and I had serious doubts that it were going to come out as attractive as it has. Now, as we say, these fancy timbers are there for decoration. So if you like them, they also make your queue unique to you. And so therefore you can recognise your queue. You know, if somebody picks it up and you're using it and you see across the room, hang on, that's my queue. So they also give you an identification mark so that you know your queue. This U has turned out, I think, a lot more attractive than it looked halfway through.
Absolutely. Once you put the finish on, they come alive, and a plain looking queue before any finish goes on can turn into a stunner.
Yeah. So yes, we'll see how that goes. Now this timber, again, it's so there's so much going on. It's incredible. I mean, yeah. I mean, what's this, Mike? This is stunning.
It's an Australian burr.
Right.
And again, horrendous wood to work with. It didn't plane at all. Like most burrs, it's got lots of knots and lots of different grains, which means you put a plane to it and it breaks in half. But eventually, a lot of hand sanding the splices in basically, and we got a queue out of it.
It's not Amboina, is it?
No, I think it's a greenstone mallee or something similar.
Right, okay, not one I'm familiar with, but I'll tell you what, that's an absolute beauty. Now, we haven't really touched on it, but you do make them snooker spec and pool spec, don't you?
I do,
Obviously
yeah.
not the same queue. So some of them are shorter, thinner, lighter, and what have you. It's because, as we've said before, because you play pool yourself as well.
Yeah, when I first started making queues, the temptation is to make every queue my spec, because then to me it feels like a good queue when I pick it up. But clearly if people are going to come here and try queues, not everybody wants a queue made to my spec, so yeah, there's pool queues, snooker queues. A lot of people play pool with a larger tip, so it tends to be maybe pool a little bit lighter, snooker a little bit heavier, as well as tip size.
And finally in this group, what do we have here?
That's a full snakewood butted queue, very similar to my favourite queues of queue collecting days, so the EGR Riley.
Yeah.
Again, stunning piece of wood, terrible to work with.
Yeah. The end product of snakewood, I'm a big fan of snakewood, is just outstanding, but by no means is it the only beautiful decorative wood out there, as we've already seen. And when you get this high gloss finish on them, as you said, they shine out, and they do. And you just want to look at them. I mean, yes, queues are designed to be played with, we all know that, but they're also a thing of beauty when they're made to this standard as well.
You used to see a lot of those in the old queues, the EJRs, with cracks in.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with the queue, just snakewood does what it wants, and it cracks an awful lot. That queue cracked an awful lot as I was making it, probably 3 to 4 months of settling, filling the cracks, resealing before we could put any finish on, and then a month or so to finish it as well.
Yeah, and I mean it is a stunner. Now these 4 here are, I believe, a slightly different finish, am I right?
Yeah, it's still an oil based finish, but it's an oil with hardener, high gloss finish. I think looks stunning, offers some protection as well. I had some damp about a year ago, and the queues finished with a natural oil, nothing else, did not fare well to damp.
Right.
So I think it may look like people might like the feel of it, but if you're not going to be that conscientious looking after your queue, I'd definitely say something with a hardener is probably better. Save your queue in the long run.
Now we talk about looking after your queue. Some of the main things that people do that are scandalous is leaving a queue in a car overnight when it might be frosty, or in a car during the day when it may get incredibly hot. Your queues don't enjoy and don't survive well under vastly differing temperatures, so you need to keep it in an environment, either in a case, or better still, get it out of the case now and again so it can breathe, give it a polish, you know, and look after it that way, and it will last you a lifetime, believe me not. And when we talk just a little bit about old queues before we finish, we'll show you that they do, in fact, if you look after them, last a lifetime. So what timbers do we have here, Mike?
So 2 sets of rosewood, Santos I believe, although I do mix them up, so maybe a slightly different type, but just with a thick sycamore veneer on that one.
Sycamore, nice. And next? Oh, wait a minute, sorry Mike, pardon me, we'll go back. This timber here?
It's the same, so it's a double butted rosewood.
It's dark, you see. Oh, it's not on that side, yeah. Again, you see, it confuses because it varies so much. But again, if you like the variety, some people want everything very uniform. But if you like the variety, again, to individualise your cue, what could be better? But
Yeah.
there's not many people going to have one like that.
No, I think that there's maybe in some people's mind that rosewood is a cheaper wood than ebony, but there's not a huge amount in it, to be honest. I mean, you're talking 10, 15 quid less in materials, that's all. So if people have it in their mind that rosewood's a cheaper product, not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this one?
An ebony butt with 4 Santos rosewood lower splices, maple veneer on that one, thick maple veneer, and a maple shaft.
Another beauty. And this one?
I don't know where this one came from, so just decided to make a Pink Panther style cue, 4 long pink veneers. It's ebony, long splices, so main butt, some I think maybe 14-inch ebony splices with veneers, then a front splice of ebony again with another pink veneer.
Very nice. In these days I can't say it's a ladies' cue because of the pink, but my first thought was it's a ladies' cue. And finally, what do we have here?
I think everybody loves that cue for the moment. I stuck some pictures up on Facebook. So that's it's an ash cue. It's a full olive wood butt with some ebony veneers that I've made myself.
Now, these stringing, if you like, they go right to the end, don't they?
Yeah, so when you make the cue, you splice your 2 splices, which have the veneer attached to them, and then you splice the 2 other splices, and they go overlap, so you end up with a line that goes all the way down the cue.
And whenever you look at a connoisseur replica, a lot of people like connoisseurs, you know, the cue that Stephen Hendry made famous. A lot of cue makers don't have what I'm calling the veneer, the stringing, because it goes all the way to the end. A lot of people forget to do that. So that's an interesting one from a history point of view, the way it looks. I think we've got here a selection. Most people will find something that they like, and the thing about something being very striking, obviously you're going to get negative reaction, where people, oh, I don't like that. But nevertheless, it's fantastic timbers, used to decorate a cue, sometimes used to weight a cue or to keep the weight of a cue down, and selected with great care by Mike's Watchfly. So I think they're a nice selection of cues.
And purely decoration, so again, I make cues because I like to see the outcome. I really want to make a plain ebony cue, it might play great, but I enjoy experimenting and seeing how they turn out.
Well, I've enjoyed seeing those. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, Mike, I found that incredibly interesting. I was looking forward to coming over to see you again. I've enjoyed seeing the cues, the timber, your knowledge, sharing in your knowledge. Thank you for the invitation. I hope people will like and subscribe to Cues and Views, and I hope that some of you will get in contact with Mike if you're into cues as much as we are. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So again, we're now going to go upstairs, have a cup of tea and raid your biscuit barrel.
And one day we might even see the workshop.
One day we might even see the workshop. An ongoing treat which I have thoroughly enjoyed.